Now time to make our functions take inputs and give outputs. Let's say you're writing a program in which you have to calculate the volume of a prism. So let's define a function for that, and this function should be able to calculate the volume of not just one prism with one set of dimensions, but any given prism. So our function should take those dimensions as input. Let's define a function def. I'm taking the name as prism vol, like a shortcut for prism volume. Now in between these parentheses, you can create a bunch of variables. These are called parameters of this function. Parameters are the temporary variables which are created whenever the function is called and deleted when the function is executed completely. Now I am taking B, H and L because this is what a prism looks like, and those are the parameters needed to calculate its volume. Okay, now whenever the function is called, the corresponding values of base, height and length of the prism are stored in these variables or parameters. We will see how to call it like that in just a minute. For now, just assume that those values are here. Now what to do? I want to calculate the volume and display it on the screen. So I write volume equals half BH times the length of the prism. Okay, now to display it, I use print statement. Volume of the prism is vol. Okay, now the function is defined. Let me run that. Now the function is defined. Now let's see how to actually pass in those values. It's simple. All you have to do is, while calling the function, you can pass in the values you want in between the parentheses separated by commas. An important thing to note here is that these values are called arguments. No, not that type of argument that we have with the shopkeeper about the discount. These are just called like that in programming terminology. Just enter the values and these arguments will get assigned to the parameters in the same order as they are. So the first argument gets assigned to the first parameter, the second one to the second parameter, and so on. Now if we run this, we get the output. So now what if we gave more arguments than there are parameters or less arguments than there are parameters? What would happen? Take a guess. If you guessed error, then you're absolutely right. If the number of arguments don't match with the number of parameters, the interpreter will raise an error. To overcome this, we have a concept in Python called default arguments. In the function definition, you can give as B equals 0, H equals 0, L equals 0, or any other value that you want, not just zeros. Now these are called default arguments for your function. So now even if the user don't specify any arguments, it's okay. By default, these parameters will get those values. You can choose to give some parameters a default value and not to give some parameters a default value. For example, I am removing the default parameter of B. The parameters which have a default value are called default arguments, and the parameters which don't have a default value are called positional arguments. The rule in Python is that all the default arguments should come in the last. So that means if I give B equals 0 here and remove the H equals 0, this will give us an error. Now if I save it and then call the function like this with just one value, now this 3 will get assigned to B and H and L will get the default argument zeros. Let's run it and see what happens. Obviously we get the 0. Like that you can give as many parameters as you want. In the next video we will see how to take output from the functions.